We've taken a look at a number of iterations of Christendom, post-Constantinianism, the Crusades, the magisterial reform, etc. And we've seen that they essentially argue that, well, because God has objective morality and we know what is good and what is bad, and that doesn't change, and because God has shown us the types of civic laws that he really likes, especially in the Old Testament, then we, as God's arms, in government, as Christians, know how to govern society and what makes for a good society. Therefore, we can implement those things, and God has given us the sword to enforce that. Yet, modern Christendom looks very different than those iterations of Christendom that we've taken a look at. And why is that? Well, two reasons, I think. Number one, we are inconsistent. We like to say, well, we're not violent like they were. That was inappropriate. And really, that's wrong. Like, to be consistent would be to be bearing the sword and to enforce objective morality, which includes fighting idolatry and fighting adultery and all of those other things with the sword. Secondly, we don't have the same opportunity. And this is the one that I really think hits home, because we say that we are more advanced, but really, if we had the power, we'd be stoning and killing a lot more people, right? As consistent Christians. And so we just don't have the exact same opportunities that more ancient iterations of Christendom have had. Nevertheless, we grasp at power and we try to blend Christianity with the state. And that has some serious negative ramifications on the church. At least three, which I'm going to identify in this episode. First, it prevents us from bearing cross when Christianity joins with the government. And Salvian talks about this in his work on the government of God. And he's in ancient Rome, and he's like, man, as Rome gets more Christian, it's just worse and worse. And part of the reason for that, Salvian identifies, is that nobody bears their cross anymore. Rather than suffering and serving for others, they use government to pander their own comfort. And so Christianity devoid of cross isn't really Christianity. Second, government requires inherent moral compromises. You can't run government efficiently without having moral compromises. Whether that's a moral compromise of trying to blend sword and love, or whether that's a moral compromise of trying to make sure that you maintain power, government requires moral compromises. Finally, Erastianism, or the government co-opting the state, ends up declawing or castrating the church. And this is because the church loses its prophetic voice and it becomes court prophets rather than wilderness prophets. A church that masters the state is really mastered by the state.